Hello, everyone, and welcome to my Release and Breathe Yin Yoga class. This practice is about an hour long and focuses on releasing some areas in the body that typically tend to be pretty tight for most of us. As with any yin practice, it's up to you whether you choose to support yourself with props or not. It's a very individual practice. I do recommend having a blanket, a bolster or pillow or a couple pillows, and a block if you have one. They don't have to be official yoga props. You can just use a bunch of blankets and pillows or cushions from around your house. We just like to support the body in different ways with them, so they don't have to be real yoga props to accomplish that. When you are ready, we are going to get started in this practice in a half frog pose, which is a pose where we're lying down on the belly. I like to have a blanket handy for this. Just unwrapping a blanket so that you can make a nice little pad off the side of your mat. But you'll come down onto the belly. And you'll keep your right leg straight and bend your left knee up alongside you. And then you'll lie down, turning your face to whichever side's most comfortable for you to do so. You might support underneath of the head or neck with another blanket or a pillow, or underneath of the hips with a blanket or pillow. It's finding a passive opening in the hip here, in the connective tissue and fascia of the hips. And in all of our yin poses and all of our yin practices, we aim to find our principles of yin. So find your edge, that's the first principle. Find the place where you feel this pose, but not an overwhelming amount. Find an edge that you can stay with. Find an edge where you can find your second principle of yin, stillness, without gripping, without forcing, but with a sense of allowing, surrendering, releasing. Find an edge where you can find your second and third principle, where you can stay in the pose. Where we can find stillness, find softness, and stay. More often than not, the challenge of staying and staying still comes not from the physical aspects of our yin postures, but the mental and emotional aspects of our yin postures. It can become hard to be still when the mind wanders off to uncomfortable places. And the mind tells us that it's bored or it's had enough. And so we use a few different tools to stay present in our yin practice. You can put on music if you haven't already and focus on the music as it changes and comes and goes, rises and falls. You can focus directly on the sensations you feel in the body as they come and go, change, transform. Or you can set an intention for your practice that you can come back to when the mind wanders. Perhaps it's a mantra. Perhaps it's an affirmation. Perhaps it's even a dedication to someone or something else. If you're choosing to practice with an intention, perhaps you set one for yourself here. Bringing it into the forefront of your mind. Sealing it in. Taking a deep, full breath in through the nose. And a long, gentle sigh out. Stay with the breath. Especially in this posture where the belly is down on the ground, you might feel the breath as it lifts and lowers and rises and falls in the back of the body. Notice if you bring in any sense of gripping, engaging, activating. Allow yourself to soften. Always reminding ourselves that in our yin practice, the releasing and the growth and the change in a pose comes from the softening. Unlike our more active styles of practice where oftentimes the growth comes from the effort, the movement, the strength. Our yin is our complement to that, our counterpart to that. Take another few breaths here. Deep breath in. Sigh it out. Very slowly, gently bring your chin to center. Slowly extend the left leg back behind you. Stack the hands and rest the forehead on the hands, and just bend the knees and windshield wiper the feet side to side a few times. Maybe you circle the heels clockwise and counterclockwise a few times. And as you're ready, if you have that blanket pad, you'll pick it up and move it over to the right side of your mat, or off of the mat. You'll begin to bend your right knee up along the right hip, finding your half frog pose on the right side. Allowing the arms to rest wherever they're most comfortable, the head and neck to turn whichever side it's most comfortable. Supporting anywhere else in the body that you need, how you need, with what you have. Finding your edge. And so for you, you may not need to support the body at all. You may need a lot of support that might differ side to side even. Again, we want to feel the pose, so we're not supporting these poses so much that they become restorative. And that's not to say that restorative yoga is bad. It's a beautiful, powerful practice as well. But in restorative, we aim to not feel the poses as much as possible, to completely relax and soften without sensation. And in yin, we want the sensation, we want the fascia, the connective tissue to release, to open, so that our muscles too can open. Although in both styles of yoga we're soft and there's no effort or movement, in yin there's an opening and a sensation happening. So the goals of the practices are different. So notice if you're supporting your posture so much that they're becoming restorative, and maybe that's what you need today, and that's okay. But maybe you can challenge yourself to take away a little bit of support so that you do feel the pose.
Not an overwhelming amount that makes you grit your teeth or fidget or tense to be there. Certainly not an overwhelming amount where there's pain. We never want to feel pain. But there might be a little discomfort. And we learn how to stay with that, to breathe into it, to find a bit of comfort in the midst of that. Find your edge. Find stillness. And stay in that stillness. Breathe into it. Take 15 to 20 more breaths here. Not necessarily forcing the breath, just noticing it as it comes and goes, as its natural rhythm and pace. Whereas our more active styles of yoga, like vinyasa or hatha, focus on the doing, the striving, the effort and engaging. Our yin practice focuses more on the allowing, the feeling, the noticing, the being. It's a more introspective practice when we focus in on the sensations of the body and the movement of the breath and the way they change over time. Take a couple more breaths here. Deep breath in through the nose. Sigh it out. Slowly start to bring your face to center. Stack the hands, rest the forehead down, extend the right leg back behind you. And just bend the knees and windshield wiper the feet around. Finding whatever movement you need in the lower body to release that pose in the body. And here, gently re-extend the legs behind you. Take the hands under the shoulders, pressing up to tabletop. And here in your tabletop, just find a few rounds of cat and cow, dropping the belly, lifting the heart. Exhaling to round. Inhale, drops the belly. Exhale, round. Once more, inhale. Exhale. To inhale to neutral. And for this next posture, you have a couple of different options. We'll either take full frog pose, which can be a pretty intense hip opener. And so if it's too intense for you, please take a wide-legged child's pose instead. In both postures, I do recommend putting a blanket underneath of the knees, especially if the knees are sensitive. And you let the knees come wide apart. If you're coming into frog, typically we allow the feet to turn out, but they can certainly go straight back behind you instead. If they're in child's pose, they'll come all the way together to touch. You let the knees start to separate. And I like having a bolster handy, perhaps underneath of the hips. You can put as much
support under the hips as you need, maybe underneath of the belly. Maybe you even put a block or just another pillow underneath of a pillow under the far end of the bolster to elevate it for the chest. And turning the face to one side or the other. And this is a pose where we really want to be mindful and intentional about finding our edge. So again, we don't go so far that we have to grit our teeth or fidget or constantly look around trying to escape the pose to be there. We don't support it so much that we just fall asleep in the pose because it's so comfortable and we just check out of being present to be there. Although with this pose, I think the latter is kind of hard to do. And although we resist the urge to move after we find our edge, there's always exceptions to the rule. So if you find that you went too far and you can't stay there, you can always mindfully adjust to back out of the pose. And likewise, if you find that your edge melts away and you've made space to deepen, you can always mindfully deepen into the pose. And surrender a little further, maybe remove a little bit of support. Find your edge. Find stillness. And breathe. In many of our yin postures, they can look very similar to their vinyasa or hatha yoga counterparts. So there is a pose in those styles of yoga called Mandukasana, or frog pose. And if you've practiced it before, try to think of this pose as a different pose altogether, because it is. Although it might look similar on the outside, we're not forcing, the muscles aren't engaged, we're not pulling ourselves deeper, we're not worrying so much about alignment because we're not engaging and pulling or forcing ourselves deeper. And so for any yin posture that looks similar to a yang posture, try to let go of what you think you know about that pose. And let this pose and yin be a whole different experience. Breathe, breathe, breathe. Especially if the sensation you're feeling is intense, breathe. Especially if the mind is wandering somewhere else, breathe. Let your breath be the anchor that keeps you present, that keeps you here and now and nowhere else. And when the mind does wander off, which it will, without judgment, without frustration, just breathe and come back. Allowing your yin practice to be a kind and compassionate one towards yourself. Because there's no reason for it to be anything else other than that. Notice if you've brought tension in anywhere. In the face, the jaw, the fingers, the toes, the creases of the hips or the belly. As best as you can, let it go, soften, put it down. Take 15 more breaths here.
Take a few more. Deep breath in. Sigh it out. And here, take the hands underneath of the body. Start to lean forward some. Bring your toes together. Bring the knees closer together. And if you're not in child's pose, move into child's pose for a moment. And in your child's pose, just kind of sway side to side some. And just take a few moments to find whatever movements you need to release that pose in the body, whether it's staying in child's pose, maybe it's rising up and finding cat and cow, or circling through the hips in one direction and then the other. Because our yin practice is really individual and personal, the ways that we need to move to release poses in the body is very individual and personal to us as well. So what might feel best for me to release that pose might not feel good for you, and vice versa. So be open to being curious and exploring which movements feel best in your body after each pose. Good. As you're ready, we're going to come to seated. We're going to come into caterpillar pose, and I really like sitting on the edge of a blanket in caterpillar just to help tilt the pelvis forward to help assist in the fold, especially if your hips or hamstrings are tight, that you lean back when you're sitting up like this. Then I definitely suggest sitting on the edge of a blanket. And then once you're ready, you'll just start to round the spine, folding in, letting go. If it's uncomfortable for you, for your head and neck to just hang out in space like this, you might take a block or a bolster onto the shins to rest your forehead on. The arms can rest wherever they're most comfortable. Find your edge. And notice where you feel this pose. Is it in the legs, as it often is in a vinyasa class? Or perhaps you feel this pose more in the back of the body, where it's often felt more in a yin practice. And that's not to say that if you feel it in the legs that you're doing it wrong. There is no doing it wrong. Unless you're intentionally putting yourself in pain, that's doing it wrong. Just notice what you notice, feel what you feel, where you feel it, how you feel it, what it feels like. Get curious and investigate the way these poses feel in your body. One of the things my yin teacher always says is notice what you notice. And again, if you practice a posture like this, Paschimottanasana, in a vinyasa class, let go of what you think you know about it and treat this pose, caterpillar pose, as a different pose altogether, where the spine is round and the legs might fall out to the sides, the feet aren't flexed, the belly's not engaged, the legs aren't engaged. Think of it as the counterpart to that pose. Scan the body, checking for any unintentional tension or engagement anywhere. And soften into those places, release them, let go of them. Take 20 more breaths here. Take 8 more. Deep breath in. Sigh it out. Slowly, mindfully start to rise out of the pose. And at the top, just engage the legs, flex the feet, engage the thighs, sit up tall, reach the arms overhead. Take a few breaths here. Then take the hands back behind you, bend the knees, plant the feet on the mat, hips width distance apart, and just press down into the feet to lift the hips to a reverse table here, countering that pose in the body. And hold here for 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Lower the hips back down. And here we're going to begin to move into our dragon pose, which is another more intense hip opener, but opening through a different area of our hips than our frog poses did. We'll start with our right leg forward this time. So again, I really suggest having a blanket underneath of the knee and getting pillows or bolsters here. I like to wedge them partly underneath of my back thighs so that as I come forward, I have something that's stopping me from just hanging out in space, but that it's letting me find my edge and be supported there. So you'll have to adjust how much support you're putting underneath of that thigh. I also like to use a block for my forehead as well. And you might stack something for underneath of the forearms as well as the forehead. Your right knee might fall out to the side, it might not. Your foot might start to fall open, it might not. Again, this is all about you, an individual practice for you, not like our vinyasa styles where there's a precise alignment that we all try to follow. In yin, because our muscles are soft, we end up settling into our skeletal alignment, and all of our skeletons are slightly different. So your femur bone, your thigh bone, might be inserted in your hip socket a little more externally rotated than someone else's, where your foot might naturally want to turn out or your knee might want to fall open. Likewise, it might be more internally rotated than someone else's, where your foot slightly turns in or stays forward and your knee slightly falls inwards. You might have one side that's different than the other, where one hip does one thing and the other does another when we settle into our skeletal alignment. And one of what I think is the beautiful thing about yin is that we're able to get curious about our own bodies and notice those things and those differences in a way that we can't in a more active yang style yoga practice. And breathe, breathe, breathe. Find stillness. Find softness. Find your appropriate edge in those things. And give yourself permission and grace to adjust if you end up going too far or not far enough for you. Give yourself grace and understanding if this pose is difficult for you to stay still in. Because even though we practice yin yoga differently than more active styles of yoga, it is still a practice. It is still something that we work on, the skill of surrendering and allowing, just as we work on the skills of strengthening and balance. Something that grows and changes over time with more practice. So a pose that today might make your mind run wild and is insanely hard to be still in for you might become a pose that you find comfort in later on, where stillness comes natural to you later on, or just more natural than it does now. Take 20 breaths. Come back to whatever keeps you anchored in the present. Whether that's the breath, the sensation, what's going on around you, music, a mantra or intention. Come back to it. Take 8 more breaths. Take a deep breath in through the nose. Sigh it out. Slowly, mindfully start to rise back up onto the hands if you lowered down. And begin to push gently out of the pose till you can slide your right knee back. Tuck the toes under and lift to down dog. And just for a moment here, maybe you pedal the feet, maybe you find movement, or maybe you just focus on stillness, strengthening into the hands and feet. This is a pose that I find can be really effective for countering our dragon poses. But for you, maybe you'd rather find hip circles and tabletop, child's pose, or something else. And be free to take those other options. Listen to your body and what intuitively feels best for you. But take a few breaths wherever you are. And as you're ready, drop the knees down if they're lifted. Begin to bring your left foot forward, setting up for dragon pose on the left side, which may be very different than the right. So be willing to support yourself differently as you need, whether that means more or less or just something different altogether. And supporting under your right thigh as much as you need, under your right knee, under your forehead, your forearms or hands. And then once you find your edge that's appropriate for you, close the eyes, find stillness, find softness, find your breath, and stay. With no pain, nothing overwhelming, nothing sharp or shooting. Notice what you notice. Notice how your experience of this side may be different than your experience of the first side, and how they may feel like different poses altogether. And in a way they are. Notice how your experience of this pose, our dragon pose, may vary from a lizard pose and a more active yang style of yoga if you practice that, because they are. Breathe into the opening, breathe into the releasing, breathe into the discomfort. And maybe with your breath you find a little bit of comfort in the midst of that discomfort. Find 20 more breaths. notice if your edge melted away and you were given an opportunity to deepen for the next few breaths. Doesn't mean you have to deepen, but just notice that the opportunity presented itself. Take a few more breaths here. On your next inhale, take a deep, full breath in. Gently sigh it out. Slowly and mindfully come back up onto the hands. If you lowered down, work to gently bring the left knee back to meet the right. And then tuck the toes to lift to down dog if that's where you wish to go. Otherwise, find another place that helps you release that pose in your body. There's no right or wrong answer. It's whatever feels best to you, and listening to that. Deep breath in, breath out. Inhale and exhale. Good. Here, as you're ready, we work to come down onto the back. You might want to move your blanket so that you can put it behind the head, which can always feel nice whenever we're laying down on the back. And as you come down onto the back, hug the knees into the chest. Rock side to side. Maybe you circle the knees clockwise and counterclockwise here. And then here, cross your left leg over top of the right, and then let both of your legs fall to the right. Finding a brief twisted roots twist. You can stay here without any support at all, or you can put a bolster or blanket behind the length of the spine or underneath of your bottom knee. Of course, if it's too much for you to have the legs crossed, you can always uncross them and have the legs together and bent, or have your bottom right leg straight out in front of you instead. The arms can be wherever's most comfortable for you. Just taking 15 total breaths here. A few more. Soften the face, the jaw, the breath. Take a deep breath in. Sigh it out. Very gently uncross the knees, come back to center. Hug the knees into the chest, rock side to side. Maybe you circle the knees clockwise and counterclockwise. Whatever movements you need to release that pose, I like to take a brief bridge pose here for a moment or two. Maybe you'd like to take a brief happy baby or plow pose or something like that. It's completely up to you, whatever feels best. And then as you are ready, cross your right leg over top of your left and let both legs fall to the left. Again, support yourself however you need here, whether that's support under the spine, under the legs, whether you need to modify how your legs are if twisted roots isn't working for you. Find your edge and then find stillness there and stay for 15 breaths. Take a few more. Deep breath in. Sigh it out. Gently come back to center. Hug the knees in. Find the movements that you wish to find to counter that pose in your body. Breath in and out. And then from here, begin to release yourself wherever it is that you wish to take rest today. Whether that's supported by props or not. Maybe you're covering up with a blanket. Maybe your legs are up a wall. Just wherever's most comforting and comfortable for you to end your yin practice. And allowing the posture you choose to be one that's restorative, where you feel supported in the least amount of sensation as possible, where you can let go, letting go of the effort, letting go of the ease, and resting in a space in between that's neutral, that's soft and still, with nowhere to go and nothing to do except to be here and to be. Gently begin to deepen your breath. Taking your deepest breath in so far. Your longest, slowest, softest breath out. Drawing the knees into your chest from wherever you are and gently rolling off to one side. Allowing your top hand to rest at your heart as you arrive there. Taking a moment just to take a moment. To stay in this quiet and soft, still place another moment longer. Noticing what it feels like for you to be in this space. And knowing that you can carry this feeling with you for however long you need to. And that you can access it at any time because it lives within you, not without. With that same hand, gently press yourself up to seated, bringing the hands together at the heart. And I just wanted to end this practice with a sense of gratitude towards you for sharing your time, your space, and this practice with me. I hope that you can carry any benefits you have with you now for however long you may need them. And until I see you on your mat again,